All right, now we're going to put on this other gamble, the rear one. This one's going to be a little bit more tricky because there's not as much contact area for this clamp to get onto, so it's going to be a little bit more loose. Just got to be really careful when clamping this one down to make sure everything is good to go. And again, another thing to do before you do anything, check, make sure it's square and good enough. There, tight. All right, don't do it too tight or else it's going to end up making it not square, because I'm only touching at this little part down here. All right, so get this screw in here. There we go. Piece is done. And one more to go. Nice and loose, not too tight. Okay, check. Make sure it's square. Off just a little bit. All right, nice and square again. Then we'll put our last screw in. There we go. And then that piece is in. There we go. Looks good. Just run through. Square. Square. So we know that this piece is good to go for putting on our shingles at this point. All right. Pretty easy for putting these shingles on the top. You have your ridges here, which also correspond with the ridges on these gambles. So you're not going to have to do a whole lot of guessing on putting this thing on. One nifty thing is that it comes with this roof block right here. I think it says roof block. To make sure that you are putting the holes in there the correct way and not putting it over too far and then completely missing your gamble. But you need to be careful. Like I said, I already pre-put this together, and this, maybe it's just mine or maybe it's a manufacturing thing, but this particular roof block is not even. So if I line it up here and put it on there, it should be good to go. But if I come over to this side, I now have 4 millimeter gap. All right. So what you can see here is you just saw it was nice and flush on the one side, but now look at, I have a gap between here. Right? Nice and flush, flush, gap. So what ended up happening, because again this roof block isn't even, is you'll notice that some of these kind of got dangerously close to the edge on this side. It all ended up working out because again I used, you know, this quick flip here, and it did drill a hole into here, and then put a bevel here or a countersink on this wood. And so what ended up happening is I drilled a hole in here. Now if I didn't drill that hole in here and would have just went with the screw, more than likely this would have splintered, and I would have had a cracked gamble here, which isn't a good thing. And it wouldn't happen if it was dead center. Again, like this. This was where the side that I used the roof block, and look at it, made it right down the middle where it should be. But now the other side to the edge. This side, guaranteed, probably would have cracked. So be mindful of that. Check your roof block, and then if it doesn't line up the right way, what you can do is shift it over 2 millimeters, and you should not have a problem at that point. So let's get these pieces on here. And again, you just see it kind of slides down onto there. Really nifty and very nice. And then after you get these on, check and make sure that everything is good to go. And it doesn't matter with this roof block because it's not going to work anyways. So again, I highly recommend that you go ahead and pre-drill these before you tighten them down, or else you could run the risk of, again, cracking that gamble down the middle or off to the side if it isn't even on both sides, which, again, that's a costly mistake. Stop it. Okay, good to go. All right, there we go. Shingles on. Last bit that we got to do is put our ridge cap on. So the next thing that I encountered when putting this ridge cap on is it's too tight because of how these shingles fit into these grooves right here. It made it too tight here at the top for this ridge cap. This back side was okay and good, but this side not so much. So what you may have to do is hammer this down. But if you do that, you run the risk of, again, splintering the wood. If you had more time, one thing that you could do in this case is you could take your chisel and just slightly take off little bits of wood until you get down to a comfortable size there to make sure that it fits nice and easy in there without cracking the wood. So again, that's not going to work, and what will happen as I push this down, these pieces are going to start pulling up because it's going to force these shingles back and up and out. Which again isn't good because now look at, I have this big old gap there, which does us no favors. That's not what we want. And we want to make sure this thing is seated really flush down there so we don't have any of these big gaps. So what I'll have to do is take this in a little bit to make sure it's nice and flush.